Let me see. All right, we're officially recording. Linda, go for it.
All right, I have a story of inspiration for you this morning. So grab your coffee, grab your drink, because it's going to be a few minutes. Right? All right. In 1869, a proposal was passed to build a charity hospital to provide care for freed slaves and indigent veterans of the Confederacy. But it was delayed because of funds. In 1876, another proposal was passed to build the same hospital, but this time it was for all indigent and destitute individuals without distinction of race or color. In 1949, the hospital was named the Confederate Memorial Medical Center, as it was dedicated to the original purpose, which was to treat freed slaves and veterans of the Confederacy. But my story is not about a hospital, but about a young girl from a small town who never went to college or graduated high school. She only had an 8th grade education and a strong belief in the Lord. She became a woman at the age of 14 when she was forced to marry the man who impregnated her because of her family's Christian beliefs was that there shall be no children born out of wedlock, and the concept of date rape had yet to be discovered. At the age of 15, the woman gave birth to a son in the Confederate Memorial Hospital in the same town where she grew up. Her son was born 4 months premature and with a birth defect in one of his legs that was so severe he couldn't be treated at the medical center. He was transferred to the world's first Shriners Hospital in the same town where she grew up. His surgeries and treatments went on for the first few years of his life and often required extended separations from her. Not having much money, the young mother walked to and from the hospital, no matter the weather or the time of year. For the first few years of her marriage, she was beaten and raped by her husband. Her husband, when drinking with his friends, would allow his friends to beat on her as well. She didn't leave because in those days, women were property of their husbands. She also didn't leave because it wasn't her path. And as hard as it was to live her life, it was easier to follow God's path. At the age of 16, she gave birth to a second son. And although this child was also the product of rape, the concept of marital rape had yet to be discovered. Despite her circumstances, she held on to her faith and her prayer and her devotion to God. She believed in the Bible and that God did lay her path before her, and that when it was her time to change, it would be revealed to her. As much as she wanted to leave and as much as she prayed, it was not her time. God had yet to reveal what her path was. Her husband was eventually called off to war, and without childcare, she could not work, and without money, she could not find childcare. She became friends with an older woman who lived next door who offered to babysit her boys for free. She took the woman up on her offer, and she went to work. The young woman was able to work, make her own money, but she still struggled to raise 2 boys. One day, while walking with 2 toddlers and carrying groceries, a man in a long car pulled up and offered her a ride. She wasn't akin to taking rides from strangers or talking to them, given the life that she had endured, but she accepted. And so although leery, they connected right away because both were born in a small suburb of Houston, Texas. And they talked, and when they reached her home and they said their goodbyes, the man told her that she was going to be okay and that she would know what to do. She didn't know what she meant, and she said goodbye. And as he started to drive away, he yelled at her, and she went back to the car window, and he said to her, "Look me up if you never need anything, and just remember my name." And she said, "Okay." And he says, "My name is Howard Hughes." She didn't know who he was at the time, but she believed him for some reason. She took the money that she had saved from paying for childcare. She remembered his words that everything was going to be okay and she would know what to do, and she divorced her husband. The older woman who cared for her boys had a grown son who had just returned home to live with his mother. The young woman did not become friends with this man, and she became concerned because her son started to call him daddy. And as much as she tried to tell her young boys that the man was not their father, they insisted he was. One evening, the young woman went to meet a date at a local diner, and instead of her date showing up, the man that her boys called daddy showed up and said that he turned her date away. They had dinner, and the man told the young woman that they were going to be married. Living by her faith and all that she endured, and recognizing that God had led her to a man that loved her boys and they loved him, she agreed, and they were married right away. The woman went on to lead a life without an education, without intelligence, and without any foresight about the future would hold. She led a life of poverty, but devotion. She led a life of years of abuse and heartache. She also led a life of laughter and fun. At age 65, she was diagnosed with a terminal cancer, and without treatment was told that she had no more than 8 weeks to live. And when the doctors asked why she refused treatment, because she was in a hospital that excelled in cancer research, she explained to them that it was not in God's plan. And they asked her how she knew. And she told to them that if it was in God's plan for her to endure treatment, then he would have presented her illness to her at an earlier stage. But yet when her illness was discovered, it was after having nothing more than a backache, but the cancer had infected every organ in her body, every bone, her breast, and her blood. As the doctors continued to argue and try to persuade her, she stood her ground and she continued to share her faith. She spent the next 7 weeks bedridden, but not succumbing to her illness or her pain. She spent it laughing, playing jokes on her kids and grandkids, and calling every single person that she knew and that she could locate to make sure that she had never caused them any harm, that she had never apologized for. On the morning of her departure, her granddaughter sat on the edge of her bed, and she laid her hand on her granddaughter's hand, and she told her granddaughter, "Everything will be okay. Don't worry, you're going to be okay." And her granddaughter said, I don't know what you mean. And her grandmother told her, "You'll know." And her grandmother closed her eyes, and the granddaughter got up. She left the room, and she told her mother about the conversation. 3 years later, her granddaughter sat in her own laid in her own hospital bed, fighting odds against a large brain tumor, but not scared. She laughed, and she played, and she joked. And when the surgeons asked her why she seemed to be so happy, because all science and medicine said that she shouldn't even be coherent or be able to walk, she explained to them that she was going to be okay, that God had laid her path in front of her, and she wasn't scared, but yet she was there to have fun and play and live her life as she did. And so the doctor turned and he looked at her mother and he says, "What are your thoughts?" And I told the surgeon the same thing, that God puts our path in front of us. And if it was her time, then it was her time. And if it's not her time, then we're going to continue to live and follow his path. So I was raised like my mother to believe in blind faith, that we don't have to see the things that we believe. Otherwise, there would be no love. We don't have to see the things that we believe. Otherwise, what would feelings be? We don't see hate, we feel it. We don't see loyalty, we feel it. So many things that guide our lives are not the things that we see, but the things that we choose to believe in our hearts. We're so often dissuaded from our beliefs because of what we see. But if we take time to close our eyes and to clear our minds and to just open our hearts and let God lead us, everything will fall into place. So, my question to you guys today is, when have you just given into all odds and let blind faith guide you?
And you really want us to now talk as we comprehend the fact that that story's about you. I got it a while in, but I was like, what the? I think we need a minute, Linda.
All right.
Honestly, I know this sounds cliche, but I will say, like, Beachbody coaching was blind faith, and it sounds so simple, but it's not. I was scared shitless. We were broken. I was broken. I hated my life. And when Beachbody coaching came along, I was like, this doesn't even make sense. This doesn't make sense. Why would I do this? And I didn't even have a relationship with God back then. But I was like, why would I do something that everyone's going to make fun of? It doesn't make sense. Nobody, like, are there people really earning money from this? Like, it did not add up that there was everything that I was wanting in my life, a stay-at-home job so I could be with my baby, something that made me happier, something that made me have friends, something that just filled the void, and the void is coming from you guys. Like, it's not like Beachbody coaching, and I've gotten that comment, that negative, nasty remark from so many people, like, you're telling me Beachbody coaching filled that void? No, my tribe filled that void. My tribe, the people that I get to work with and spend time with, filled that void. That's what took that loneliness away from me. And it's, like I said, it sounds cliche, but it has given me 5 years of personal development. So I have walked through this journey. In the 5 years, my mom and I didn't talk for 2 whole years. My sister and I didn't talk for a year and something. And it has given me a closer relationship with God because I dug my heels in. I've learned forgiveness. I've learned to dig deep. I've learned to figure out how to communicate with people because I didn't learn that growing up. I grew up in a broken ass home, and it opened the door because I blindly said, I just need something different. And I don't know if this is going to work. And then it led me to Mind Body Soldier, which, guys, I am scared shitless about Mind Body Soldier. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what 5 years from now looks like. And I wake up every day praying, God, just let me do your work, not mine. Lead me on your path, not mine. I don't know if I'll fail completely, if I'll lead these people down astray, but then God tells me, no, just keep doing what I'm asking you to do. And it is very blind faith to do Mind Body Soldier, to grow this company outside of Beachbody, not only just the women's retreat, but the different life coaching. Every single tiny step of Mind Body Soldier is blind faith. Blind, scary as fuck faith. Because I don't have the answers. I get so many questions and I'm like, I don't know what that looks like, because I really don't. I give it to God and I say, can you just do that? Because I will do what you've called me to do. I will partner with you in that situation, and all the situations that God calls us to. He doesn't ask us to take the lead role. He doesn't say, here, Jack, or here, Susan, I've called you to do this. So now I'm going to push you out and you're going to go do it. No, what he says is, come, I'm going to partner with you. We're going to work together and we're going to make this happen. And once we realize that, when we realize we're not forging through by ourselves, we just have to trust, it becomes a lot easier. Because I get up every morning and I pray over our tribe. I pray over Mind Body Soldiers missions. I pray over where we're going. I pray that the right people will come to us, that we can guide them so they can help change more lives. And that's not just on a health and fitness level. That is on a mind, body, soul level. That is all encompassing, the trifecta, the Holy Trinity, whatever you want to call it level, because life is so much deeper than just helping people in one area. And I honestly think you guys, you're here so you understand that aspect of it, but look at where the leap for Beachbody has brought you that blind faith, because it does take blind faith. Everybody was probably like, I don't know what you're doing. That sounds crazy. But then look at what it's led you to. Like, look at the areas that now what's your next step in blind faith? I really want you guys to think about that. Like, yes, you took this first step of blind faith, starting Beachbody coaching. Now what's the next step? You don't just stop growing. It's not the end of your life. This isn't the end all be all. What's your next step? Because that's what I'm always doing. Like, okay, I want to continue growing and hearing from God and seeing what my path is, like in our tribe's path. What does that look like? And constantly asking him. But that part is just not easy. It's not easy at all. So I don't know. That's for me. That's, again, sounds cliche, but that's just 100% truth. So.
It's so true. You know, anxiety comes from control, whether it's lack of control or the feeling of being out of control or trying to control everything. It always comes from a place of control. And we spend so much time trying to make the uncertain certain that we drive ourselves crazy and we can't make decisions. Nobody knows what the next minute is going to hold, except that it holds God's plan. But yet we spend so much time trying to figure out what tomorrow is going to bring that we don't live right now for today. So my oldest brother, the one that was in the story, when he was 4, he was taken away from my mom by the state and put into a sanitarium. So interestingly enough, like I could write a book, but not my whole story. So the Confederate hospital, one of their first chief surgeon went on to open the first sanatorium where we lived. And my brother was taken from my mother and put into that because back then they didn't know what ADHD was, except that he had it, right? It wasn't a thing. And we didn't find out till later on, that's what it was. And so I grew up in a family with people who had attention problems. So when my son was diagnosed at age 3, it was really severe. And and my experience with my own family and her story of being without him, because she didn't know whether or not they were ever going to give her son back, because back then you didn't have rights like you do now. They could, states could do whatever the hell they wanted. She didn't know how long he was going to be there. She didn't know what they did. She just knew that she wasn't even allowed to see him. And for months, he was taken. And so he was given back, fortunately. He was probably too bad for them to take hold of. No. Right. I'd lose my shit too. But so at age 3, my son was diagnosed with ADHD. And that is what led me to my path to become who I am today and to help other people, So we just never know where our path is going to take, but everything that's come before it, yes, led me to you. Everything that's come before it was there for a reason. So when we stress about the things that have already happened and we freak out about the things that we don't know are happening, that's our deviation from God's plan, And so just think about that.
I have a good story real quick. So I don't know if you guys know the story. I just started reading this book. It's free on Kindle. If you have Amazon Prime and you don't know, because I'm the only person in the world that didn't know this apparently, that you can download Amazon Kindle and there's thousands of free books on there. Not every book you want, but thousands of free books on there. So I downloaded it on my iPhone last night. I started reading this book and I'm like obsessed. And it's called You'll Get Through by Max Lucado. And I was just reading along and it was really good, but it talks about the story of Joseph. And Joseph is the youngest of 12. He's from the lineage of Abraham, so the lineage of Jesus is all connected. And he's the youngest of 12. And the story is his dad had 2 wives. And the wife that he loved, Rachel, she was barren, right? So he had 11 sons over here with Leah. Rachel and Leah were sisters. So the dad married 2 sisters. Leah had all these babies. Well, the youngest son, the baby, Joseph, was Rachel's baby. So the woman he loved, that was Rachel's baby. His name was Joseph. So he was hated. by all of his brothers. I'm talking hated, because one, he was the youngest. He was treated like the firstborn. The firstborn gets, everything in the family. That's just the way it is back then. But he was treated like the firstborn, spoiled. He had this beautiful robe that his father had given him. I mean, they love him. Or his father really loved him. So one day they were 60 miles from home, and the brothers came up with this plan. They were going to murder Joseph, because they were like, listen, we're done with this shit. Like, we are so done. We don't want to hear it anymore. I mean, I'm talking, this is the lineage of Jesus, okay? So obviously, y'all know Jesus, but it's the lineage of Jesus. And so if you're looking at it, you're thinking, oh, it's perfect, or it's sinless, or whatever. No, not at all. Scandal, okay? The Bible's really interesting because it's full of scandals, and I love reading it. It's like my soap opera. Anyways, I digress. So they take Joseph's beautiful robe that was a gift from his father. They throw him in a pit, and they're going to kill him, right? They're going to cover the robe in blood. They're going to bring the robe back to their father and say, he died but from an attack from an animal. So they do this. They throw him in the pit, but there's some arguing back and forth. One or two of the brothers is like, I don't really feel okay with this. Well, all of a sudden, these like slave traders start walking by the pit, and they decide, instead of killing Joseph, they would lie about it. They would pretend that they killed him, but they would sell Joseph off to these slave traders, and they'd be done with him, right? And then they would take the coat back to the father and say, he died in the wilderness by a beast. We're sorry. Up Schitt's Creek, he's gone now. So they sold him, and Joseph was brought to land of Egypt, Israel, and then thrown into jail and whatever. So Joseph, literally, he went from this all high and mighty person in his life to thrown in a pit, to sold off to slavery, to going, he was thrown into a jail at one point. And I mean, he had like this, his life was great, went to shit, but he had blind faith. So it brings me back to my point. He had blind faith because he kept saying like, nope, God's going to use me. I had dreams, and God's going to use me. God is going to use me. Well, lo and behold, worked his way up the ladder. There's way more to the story, but we don't have all day. So works his way up the ladder. He became the second in command over like everything, right? He became the second in command over everything. He ended up saving the fucking world from famine. And so get this, because he had blind faith. They just kept believing in it. Well, when the famine went over the land, obviously his brothers, part of the people that were suffering, they needed food. So to get that food, you would have to go to the palace and request food. You would have to say, hey, I need grain, I need this, I need that. Well, Joseph was in charge of all that. His brothers had to come back and grovel to him and say, like, we need food, right? And they didn't recognize him right away. He recognized his brothers. And instead of saying like, nope, you screwed me, you guys were a-holes or whatever, he said, yep, granted it to him. And they were like, they recognized him. It was this wild, wild, wild story. But, and I know I digress, but I want to read this to you. It says, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about the present result, to preserve many people alive. And that's Genesis 50:20. But in God's hands, any intended evil, like Linda was talking about her mom, any intended evil was meant for good. There are generational curses. There are things that we cannot control, but they're meant, they can be used for good. So God doesn't put this like, this evil on us. And I think that's the problem what we all kind of have is like, why would he do that to me? It's like, whoa, there is free will, people. God gave us free will because he wants us to choose to love him. He gave us free will. And I love how Linda talks about her mother and how her blind faith and her constant love for God and saying, no, I know this is good. And look at Linda, look at her life, look at what has come from it. Like, she has raised children. Her daughter is now a freaking surgeon who saved, I don't know how many people, but there's one dramatic story about bullet wounds, 7 bullet wounds or something. It's all over the news. She's the youngest surgeon. Like, she's incredible. And this all came from blind faith. Her mother knowing, it's fine. I know he will use it for good. I am going to persevere. I am going to continue to push forward. I am going to continue to show up in the hard, because she could have very easily quit, given up, and said like, I have been tormented. I have been raped. I have been beaten. I have been abused. I have been used. And look what God did to me. And that is just not truth. He never does things to us. He uses the things that were done to us, the evil that is done for us, and he turns it around to incredible fucking greatness. And that greatness within us is there, and we are born with a destiny. So this was really cool. and I don't know how to get to my notes. I just started using this Kindle, but I found it last night and I was like, holy shit, this was amazing. Satan's logic, destroy him. It was all about, I'll just summarize it up. It's that no matter what difficulty, that's what it is. If you and I were having a talk over coffee, this is the point where I would lean in across the table and say to you, what do you still have that you can't lose when you're going through troubles? Think about that question. What do you still have? Like, no matter God, this is awful, but I always think of the worst case scenario. What if my kids died? What do I still have? I would be fucking in a home. And I tell Brian that you better put me in a home. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to see, if anybody goes, I'm out first, peace. I don't want to do this anymore. And I know God would bring me through, but that's just, I'd be done. Right? So, but at the end of the day, what can you not lose? We can lose everything. Everything can be lost. Really scary, but a reality check. People we love, relationships, we can lose everything. The one thing that we cannot lose that was predestined for us before we were even born is our destiny, is what we were created for. Think about that. We were created for a purpose. It is mind-blowing to me that no matter what, we can't lose that because we were made for that exact reason, literally that exact reason. And that reason and that timeline and where we were born in time, think about it too. When people struggle with pregnancy or infertility or whatever it may be, maybe their baby, that baby that was designed for them, isn't meant to be here yet. Or maybe they're meant to adopt because they're going to change that person's life to help them reach the destiny that they were supposed to reach. It is mind-blowing when you sit down and look at the map of life, when you sit down and actually take a second to think about it. The only thing we cannot lose is our predetermined destiny that was created for us. I don't care if you believe in God or not. That's just a simple fact. If you don't believe that we're not created for anything, that I don't even know why you're on this call, honestly, or watching this call later on, because you have to have some blind faith to know that there is a destiny created within you. You have to know that. And if you don't, come here and I will shake you and I will tell you and I will remind you, even on your hardest days, that there is a destiny created within you. And when we sit idly by, when we get caught up in failing at our expectations or thinking that, today's just too hard for me to show up, you are letting the enemy win. You are letting the world win against you. And I don't believe, I was listening to Unfuck Yourself by Gary John something, and I agree with him on a lot of points, but I did not agree when he was like, a lot of you probably have really mediocre dreams. And I'm like, fuck that, mediocre dreams, or all you want to do is get rich. I said, whatever anybody's dream or goal is, it is not normal or mediocre. It does not match up with the next person's. It does not mirror image like, oh, you just want to go do that. It's not a just. Take the just out. It is a huge fucking deal. Own it. Be proud of it, work hard at it, show up in the tough, and reach out, lean into the tribe that we have, because I got an email yesterday from I think she's about 40-year-old mom of 4. And she said, you know what I want most is I want a tribe like you guys have. She found me on she went down a YouTube rabbit hole, and then she stopped my Facebook pages. And so her message went through my Instagram, went to the junk folder. So then she emailed through our website, which is pretty cool because all our pages are on there. She went to the Choose Your Coach tab. She saw all of our faces. She messaged, said, contact us. She's like, hey, I was trying to reach Jack, but I didn't get a hold of her. And then her and I started talking, and that's the number one thing she wants, is right here what we have. Isn't that amazing? That when we think about inviting, and we think about showing up and having that blind faith and showing others what it looks like, is that this is what people want. And we're sitting here, I don't know, sitting idly by. I'm guilty of it. I get too busy to answer my messages. I get too busy, and I can't get to all my messages, but you know what? I can get to some. I pee in private sometimes when I lock that door, and I can voice message, or I can text real quick. It's just thinking, what is going to make a difference and change someone's life today? What is going to help me reach the destiny that I was created for? What is going to get me there? And that's really how we have to think of this business, you guys, because yes, it is a business, but we have something that can save women's lives, that can save them from being under attack from the enemy by themselves. Those negative thoughts that we start spiraling and spinning, We need to help save them just by offering it to them. If they don't come, guess what? It's a seed planted. It's a seed planted, and when they are ready or when they get broken, they know where to come because you're in their corner. So, okay, that's that dang book. I knew I read it last night for a reason.
Okay, so before I tell you what your call to action is, so I do have a question for my wingman, Michelle. So Michelle, I have always, well, not always, but since you shared your story about, starting your business and, just kind of going on that endeavor and how difficult it has been, of course, I love that and was very moved by it. It reminded me of how I came to use, I guess, reflection as a way to cope with maybe the uncertainty of the future, or the endure the trauma or things that we've been through, the heartache. And so one of the things that I use is had I not. So I know we've talked about the strategy of what if I never. It's kind of fallen align with the same type of thinking, but it's had I not, ... what would it be? So Michelle, my question for you is, had you not started your own business, what?
That's a great question, Linda. Honestly, my life would be completely different than it is right now. Starting my chiropractic business, so I started coaching and my chiro practice around the same time. And through both things, I have grown so much in my confidence, in my speaking ability, because I've had to force myself to do that, because it's hard to get out there and attract people to you and get them to know you and what you do. And so what that looked like for me early on in my chiro practice is I was going to probably 2 to 4 networking events per week. And I don't really like talking to people. I hate small talk. I hate it. And that's all what those were, unless you found like a good nugget of a person that you could talk to for a while. And that's what my life was. I had to force myself to do it because I knew that's what it was going to take. And so from that, through like different networking events and groups, I found some really incredible people that have helped me in so many ways over the past 2.5 years. And a lot of that confidence and strength came because I had a support system behind me. I had you guys, I had my family, and I knew I had that to fall back on and to rely on, and to help me grow in those ways. Because yeah, there's been so much uncertainty in my business and growth and just like the grit that it has taken to get to this point. And honestly, guys, I'm still in it right now. So in the past 3 months, my business world has been upside down like millions of times. So I was in a location in my business in Scottsdale, and I was there for 2 years. And for the last year of that time, I was really struggling there mentally and emotionally because the other doctor that was in that space really hurt me in a lot of ways, and did some things that were very unprofessional. And so I was struggling. She was a mentor of mine, and so I had to let go of all those expectations that I had of her. I had to give her grace because I know she has a good heart, but I also had to listen to my gut and take care of myself. So I left that space. I basically gave my notice in the beginning of September, and I had like 3 weeks to flip my world around and find a new place that I was going to practice out of. And through that and leaning into my network that I found and built over the past two years of my business, I was able to make connections and find a new space. And I was thrown into this world, into this women's fitness center that was really spectacular, filled with awesome people. And I'm so blessed that I got to meet them and be connected in with them, because especially some of them, I know they're going to be in my life forever. One of them being someone who's coming on our spring retreat. So it's crazy, the impact and the connections. But all that's being changed too. So I still have those people, but I also just left that space because they decided to close. So I'm just a free spirit floating around. But I have a lot of amazing people in that network that I've intentionally built over the past few years, that helps me to be less scared in the process. It still gives me anxiety. It's still nerve-wracking, but I know that I have the strength and the support to go through it.
Thank you. And I know you do too. So too often we get stuck in the trauma and the pain of the past, and we ask the question, why did I have to do this? And I can't believe I had to go through this. And, and we just get stuck and we can't move beyond the trauma or the hurt or the pain or whatever else. And staying stuck in that trauma, it prevents us from being able to see or to know what we're supposed to be doing right now. And so too often we ask the question, why, instead of reflection. And this month's theme was about finding our passion and purpose and using reflection and looking back at the past, not to be in misery about what we had to endure, but looking at the connections that have been made throughout that time, and looking at, my mother's connections with, just the history that she went to, and, having connected with someone like Howard Hughes, which she didn't even know who that was until I was an adult. And she was telling me the story because she wasn't intelligent. She wasn't educated. She didn't really have a lot of common sense. And I had to explain to her, wait, what? Tell me the story again, these kinds of things. But she said they connected, because of the conversation, this and that. But in our business and how we want to help and mentor people, we have to make connections. And we make connections by sharing and reflecting on our own connections. And so I knew that, I was going to talk on the leader call today, but I didn't know what I was going to talk about. And yesterday, Jack, when she discovered this free book, sent me a quote. And it's from Isaiah 43:2. And it says, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall the flame scorch you. And when I was going through my divorce, it was the hardest time I've ever had in my entire life. And every day I was in so much pain and misery, and I would just contemplate walking up to the roof and just stepping off. But I knew that that wasn't God's plan for me. But I also didn't know how I was going to recover, how I was going to get any better, because every day my life just continued to get worse and worse and worse. And every day I would go to work, and one of my therapists was very spiritual, and she always had a Bible on her desk. And every day I would go say hello to everybody, and I would check in, and she said, sit down. I'll read something to you. And every day she just randomly opened up her Bible, and it was the same freaking scripture every single day. And at first I was thinking, okay, did she forget that she read me this scripture yesterday? And then I started thinking, okay, is she getting early Alzheimer's or what? And it was, there was no awareness on her face that was the same scripture that she read to me yesterday. And it was day in and day out, that same scripture. And I just held on to it and held on to it and held on to it until I finally started adjusting my mindset that God's got a plan for me. He's got a purpose. He's got a reason that he's putting me through all of this misery. And that misery led me to Brad, my current fellow. Brad's the reason that my daughter is living today. And that's a whole other story. And so I knew when we were going through her brain tumor, there was never one question in my mind that she was going to die. Never. And I said, no, looking back, because I always reflect on, okay, this is my path. It's not the reflection of, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had to experience this crap, but the reflection of, this is what happened, and look at the connections and the connections and the connections. And this brought me to where I am today. And I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but I also don't worry about what tomorrow is going to bring. So when you find yourself faced with, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this, instead of asking how I'm going to get out of this, look at, had I not, and do your reflection and make connections. So your call to action today is to use the had I not to be vulnerable or to share a story, because that's how we make connections with people. And every time I share stories about something I've experienced in my life, I guarantee you, I'm going to get Instagram messages. I'm going to get Facebook messages. I'm going to get messages from you guys saying, thank you. Oh my gosh. So had I not is your strategy. Look back, reflect on something, and make those connections about how you got here, right where you are today.
Sorry, I got an idea. I gotta go.
Gotta go.
See ya, bye. That was awesome. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Linda. Susan's not on, but thank you, Susan, for always organizing these calls and just making sure that these go off without hitch. She messages me every single week, lets me know who's leading, lets me know who wants to lead our topics, everything. So I'm so grateful for you guys working. We're working as a team. And I know you guys might think, oh, whatever, it's just a leader. Oh, it's just this. No. It makes my heart so full because I did this all by myself for 4 years. 4 years. And it was a control problem for me. And it was really exhausting. And I spun and spun. I'm like, how did I not have a heart attack and die? Like, I don't know how I didn't check myself into a mental home. So I really do. And I know you guys, we all do our own things separately as well. But it's really fucking amazing to be able to hear from you, learn from you, and just connect and hear your stories. And so we can all share and grow from each other. So thank you guys. Let's take a picture real quick. I know some people hopped off and hopefully some people grabbed a sneaky photo. I don't know. Let's do a big cheese. Strategy, share a story of reflection from the past using had I not. Fabulous. All right. Yeah. Cheese. Sorry. All right, got it. I was distracted. Shocker, ADHD. All right, love you guys. I will post this recording in like the next